The reward is the moment you realise you're going to make it. That's never on the summit. My name's Jon Gupta and I run a high altitude expedition company and I spend my entire life climbing in the mountains. My love and passion for wanting to spend my time in the outdoors started in the rainforests of Belize when I took a year off before university. I joined an expedition and we went into the rainforest for 2 months. I kind of realised that there was this industry I was previously not aware of where expedition leaders would take these trips to all corners of the world, be it jungles, deserts, mountains, and I thought that sounded like a fabulous way to spend my time. And a lot of the time I operate deeply within my comfort zone, you know, at a very sort of manageable level because I'm mostly looking after other people as well. And then occasionally I find myself in a situation where I am personally pushing myself, perhaps with another friend, to the top of the level of where I climb. And I think as I push higher and higher and higher towards that limit, you find these acute moments that crop up from time to time. And in those really small moments, that's where I feel like this concept of performance edge comes in. So everything becomes super heightened, like the feel of the rock, you know, how your axe feels in the ground, the wind against your ears. And I think that's the moments when you have to make these key decisions which define the outcome of that day. I think I'd love to talk to you about a moment on Denali in Alaska in March 2018 when I was part of an incredible project with a guy called Steve and the two of it, well, I helped facilitate his world record attempt at climbing the 7 summits in the shortest amount of time possible. So 7 summits is quite simply the highest peak on every continent. Steve and I have a really amazing relationship. We ended up spending 5 months together, just the two of us, which in itself is quite incredible. And we got on really well the whole time. We didn't argue about anything, but we had a deep mutual respect for each other's sort of abilities and why each of us was there. You know, I was acutely aware of my position on the trip, being there to organise it and, you know, facilitate each mountain. But, you know, Steve can hold his own without any problem. So it was much more two mates climbing hard and fast in some big mountains, which was just like the dream for me. Denali is big and it's cold and it's hard and it is relentless. And by that I mean you fly onto the glacier on day 1, which in itself is awesome. You chuck all your kit out of the twin prop and then the plane flies away and you're stood in the middle of the Alaska National Park on your own and it's quiet. And it's very, very big. Normally in season, you'd have some rangers stationed on the mountain, you'd have a bit of infrastructure at base camp, there'd be upwards of like 150 people on the hill somewhere. But because Steve wanted to not just do this record, he wanted to absolutely smash it, we pulled Denali further into the itinerary and put it before Everest, which meant that we had to go in late winter. I'd climbed all the rest of the mountains before, except one, but this one had huge question marks over it, which is what made it so exciting. So we flew in around the 6th of March. I thought we could do it as long as we got some good weather, but I was super aware that we are going out on a limb because at that time of year, there's not only no one else on the mountain, there was no one else in the national park, and there is no rescue. Which means that if anything goes wrong high on the mountain, you're in a really difficult situation. So you have to accept that risk, and that is a huge amount of risk to accept. The first 8 days could not have been any better. We had perfect weather, blue sky, no winds, snow conditions were okay, and we were able to make good headway up the mountain. And then, of course, all good, as I feared, all good things come to an end. And Denali is notorious for big storms, and a big storm came in. So we had 2 tents, and we built huge ice block walls all the way around, so higher than the tent, and we're looking like 1.5 foot thick ice block walls. We cut them out with a saw, build them up all the way around. We're in a tiny tent strapped to the side of a very big mountain, and we are the only people on the mountain, and it feels like you're a very, very, very long way away from anywhere. And it's also really, really cold. Like, every night you're down into the -30s, every night. And in those temperatures, everything's just a little bit more difficult. A little bit. Everything's much, much more difficult. Everything freezes. Everything. So if you want to do anything, it's just a case of constantly trying to warm things up to make them work, whether that's the stove or your water from freezing or your fingers. Even though we've got these walls, the wind is obliterating the tent. Every now and then it hits it so hard it folds into your face, and then poof, the tent poles pop back out again. And you just lie there thinking, what happens if my tent blows away? And eventually the wind stops, eventually. All the while, the pressure of this whole expedition came down to this one day, or this one summit. And we'd done all the hard work, we were in like a good position, but we weren't being allowed access to the upper mountain. So this whole project, this like very expensive 5-month project, was kind of slipping away from us, Steve and I, right in front of our eyes, and we could do nothing about it other than get out the tent and rebuild the walls and then get back in the tent. And we couldn't really even talk because it was so loud. I had a weather forecast coming in, and he said there is a small window, a kind of eye of the storm type scenario. So like main storms come through, there's a small lull, and then bang, the second half of the storm's coming in. So I thought about it and discussed it with Steve, and I said, we're going to have to, I said, this is real, and we are going to be going out there. And one of the things we didn't have a choice about is we were going to have to try to go to the summit from this camp, not put in the high camp and then go from there. And I had this voice in my head ringing through. It's the ranger who had been really great with us before we flew onto the glacier and given us our briefing. He said, whatever you do, don't try and summit from the 14 camp because it's too far. And every year people try and they fail. I was sort of laughing a bit about this, but as Steve and I were packing, I had this in the back of my mind because that's what we were about to do. And we took what we hoped would be enough kit to survive a night high on the mountain if we had to. We're trying to find the balance between going light so we can go quick enough, but enough so that we could possibly stay alive. So the first thing we have to do is we left at 9 a.m, which unconventionally is the wrong way around. You normally leave in the night to summit at sunrise, but our window was going to be, the winds on the summit were going to clear like midday to midnight, and everything was just falling into place. I had to continually know exactly where I was at that time on the mountain, how we felt, and watching the clock tick down as we made our way up. I was very aware that I was stepping into what was probably going to be the biggest day of my life in the mountains, but could equally had the potential to be one of the very, very best that I'd ever have. And I kind of recognised that before we even started, because I knew how big this was. So anyway, the first part went quite well. The weather was doing as it said it would. Steve and I were feeling great, and I just can't explain how unbelievably special it felt to tiptoe across this ridge. And I had this voice in my head ringing through. It's the ranger who had been really great with us before we flew onto the glacier and given us our briefing. He said, whatever you do, don't try and summit from the 14 camp because it's too far. And everything was just it felt to tiptoe across this ridge at 5,500 meters, looking out across the entire Alaska, the Denali National Park, knowing that we were the only two people on the move. It was so good. And I think that was the first time when it really sank into me that this was quite a serious situation. So within 2 or 3 minutes of a quick break, a quick toilet break, and we were both kind of like getting cold. And I was thinking, like, we're walking into the dark on the way up. This is so wrong. It's completely wrong. But everything else felt right. There was no other reason I could find for us to stop. So after, I don't know, probably pushing 10 hours on the go, and for the first time I could see the very final summit slopes to the top. 400 meters away, 200 meters of altitude gain. At sea level, it would take 20 minutes. But I calculated it would probably take us 2 hours. And then I turned to Steve and I said to him, I sort of nodded towards the top and I asked him, I guess the most pivotal question I've ever asked anybody in any of my mountaineering career so far. I kind of said to him, do you have enough energy to get up there and all the way back to camp? I already knew the answer, what he would say, because it's Steve. But to be fair to him, he took time to process the question that I'd asked him and then just gave me like a single nod. And then in that moment, I knew that we'd done it. That question answered a million questions. Up until then, there was always doubt. You know, if I said, listen, this isn't the day, you know, not today, he wouldn't have pushed it, because I think he was very aware of how far out on a limb we were. Although nothing was wrong, we were in a very, very serious situation. So we topped out at sunset, probably the most magical moment of my entire life. Him and I stood on the top for less than 20 seconds in about -50 on a perfect day in Alaska. And it could not have been any better in any way at all. But what goes up must come down, and it took us a long time to get down, nearly 8 hours to get down, because it was dark and we were tired and it was cold. And I didn't realise quite how cold it was until I pulled my thermos flask out of my down suit pocket from inside, pulled the top off, and the contents of my thermos flask was frozen. And at that moment I thought, we really need to get down quick, because there's no way we can last a night out here. And I think we rolled back into camp at 5 a.m. after 20 hours on the go. And when Steve and I are on the go, it's generally pretty quick. So 20 hours quite easily slots straight into first place in the biggest day I've ever done. It was epic. Yeah, it's massive.